if I can invite the children to come forward for a quick introduction to today's lesson, and then Maureen, if you can come forward too, because you're going with them. Please be seated. Children, I think there's more, but come on up. You can be a representative, right? All right. Oh, yep. Excellent. I think they're running the other way. You'll have to catch them on the way out. All right, so Cameron. Oh, here they come. Cameron. Today's a special day. We're going to celebrate someone very special, and it's not Jesus. Okay? Do you, either one of you, know the name of this church? St. Paul's. Now that is named after a real person. Do you know the story of St. Paul? No? Okay. So here's the story of St. Paul. He was not a great guy. He was a leader, and he persecuted. What's that word mean? No clue. He really, I'll tell you. I appreciate your honesty. That's the most important thing. He persecuted, which means that he was mean against a certain type of people. And do you know who he was mean against? You want to guess?
People of color.
People of color. Well, people of color have been persecuted against. That's a really good answer. In this case, he was persecuting Christians, people who followed Jesus. So much so that he was witness to something that was quite horrible of a persecution. And one day, while he was walking, he had something happen. He was completely blind. All of a sudden, just like that, in the middle of the street. Could you imagine walking down the street and suddenly becoming completely and totally blind? And do you know who helped him? The Christians. The very people who he was being mean to. Now, let's think about this. We're named after a church, after a guy who used to persecute people. That's kind of weird, don't you think? But the important thing about St. Paul is he had a change of heart. He learned that maybe this life of faith of following Jesus is about the love that those people showed him on the road. Oh, he says. And so today you're going to learn more about how St. Paul, way back in the day, helped build the church so that we can be St. Paul's, and why we named ourselves after this guy. How about that? Thank you. Now you are welcome, if you want, to go back to the children's classroom with Miss Maureen, or you can just hang out in here with us. Up to you. Thank you, Maureen.
You're welcome. Honor me.
Yeah. So today we are celebrating St. Paul, this incredible, powerful story about conversion. Saul, that zealous persecutor, he was so incredibly fierce in his beliefs that he was a witness to a stoning of Stephen, which was the first deacon. This is who St. Paul was. And just like that moment, like I told the children, he had this moment on the road where he learned something new about himself and God. This chaos moment in his life where he was struck blind became so much more important to him that it became a sign to him to build this church. Now, I don't know how many of you have these moments, and they call them Damascus moments, those moments where we're on a road and suddenly we are struck by something that gives us a complete and total change of heart with absolute knowledge. How many of you have ever had a moment like that? Very few people. That is a gift. Most people, myself included, it's a little bit of a give and take. That we might have those moments, those Damascus moments, but it takes us a while to figure it out. And we learn from St. Paul, well, as a matter of fact, sometimes it's not even a Damascus moment. Sometimes it's a gentle nudging or a push. I don't know how many of you, my life of faith looks like this. God, I think this is the direction I'm supposed to be going. And I go down that direction, and then suddenly it just doesn't feel right. Something is really wrong. And I'm like, okay, God, I think it's this direction. And then I turn and go in a different direction. Then I ask myself again, does this feel right? God, is this what you want from us? And sometimes it's, I have no idea. And then other times it's like, yeah, my gifts, the chaos in the world, God's call for me have all come together. It's that gentle nudging. And we learn from the letter from St. Paul's in Galatians that it might have been that moment of clarity and a combination of gentle nudging that had Paul really understand what his call was about. So it's not an either or, it's a both and. He was blind. The kindness and love shown to him means that maybe his life of faith needs to grow and expand and be about more people and more things. And what Paul talks about in Galatians is a particular pattern of how he went to go about it, and I'd like to point it out. He first went off alone and prayed about it. That's that, oh, something chaotic happened in my life. Let me try to figure out what it means for me. And then how am I called to respond to that chaotic moment, that kindness and love shown in Paul's case? And then he goes off to a community of people and he shares his gifts and what he thinks is of God, and they respond, yes. That is clearly a call from God. And then it becomes what it is today, this incredible conversion story. You have to have openness of mind. You have to have this good prayer life. And you also have to have this community that you can bounce things off. Fortunately, things that we all have with each other today. And so I'd like for you to give a moment and think about when you might have had, dare I say it, a conversion story. We Episcopalians don't like to talk about conversion stories too much. Or a discernment story. A moment where chaos, your gift, and God all came together. I'll tell you about mine. When I was an elementary teacher, as many of you might know, and you may know this story, that I was a public Montessori teacher. So I taught in a school that was underserved in a poor neighborhood, Montessori, for anyone who could walk to that school. And lots of people really enjoyed that, so they would bus kids in. So I had this great combination in my classroom of racial diversity and economic diversity, and it was quite literally a perfect slice of what Wake County was in North Carolina. That was the modern day busing system, by the way. And so I loved this job. It was a great calling for me. But there was one day where my kids didn't divide all the ways that I had seen that they divide. You know, we would sit as teachers and divide up our classrooms according to all these things. Kids' gifts, socioeconomic status, all of these things. We try to balance everybody out. But during this particular moment, the kids didn't balance in the way that I expected. It was a Damascus moment where you probably have shared if you're old enough. 9/11. When 9/11 hit, my kids divided in two different ways. Those who had something larger than themselves, a faith community, it didn't even matter what kind of faith community, and those who did not. And those who did not have anything larger than themselves to process the grief that the community was experiencing pained me so very much. They should have something larger than themselves to share God's love and grief together with others. And so suddenly I realized that I love the kids, not because I love teaching math. I love the kids because I'm called to share in that spiritual development with them. And the public school system isn't quite the right space. I spent a couple of years discerning this call to try to figure out what this means, not only with myself, but with a priest and a community. And together we discerned that maybe I was being called to the priesthood. That was both a Damascus moment and a gentle nudging, all wrapped into one. And we, as a faith community, have conversion stories too. Now, I'm going to only point the ones that I've seen, but you who have been part of this community for many generations could probably pick more threads and more stories. But here is where this church saw the chaos of homelessness, and the space that they had on their own land, and how those two might connect, and how we might create a space for Trinity Center, who's a day center for homeless, and affordable housing for those who need a house. And so we built St. Paul's Commons. You all know this story. What an incredible moment of chaos that took the vision from individuals to the vision of a community to the actual building that we're leaning and living into today. Another moment in 2020, when we were all incredibly separated in our lives, a few of us with the technological skill and ability found a way to visually pull us together. We had choirs of way before. We were one of the first ones to do the choirs where we could see everyone's face singing in unison, and we used our prayers that way too. We invited you all to come and share video and how to say the Lord's Prayer so that we can combine the voices and hear how our connectedness can be part of our spiritual life even when we are separated. And now, I think we're being called into an era of kindness and love and community, being beacons of those three things in a world that doesn't know what that means. This is your story. This is my story. This is our story. How are we called to be in 2024? I can't wait to find out. Amen.